It's always such a huge treat to read a book, love the book, and get to talk to the author. So I am in for a treat, and so are you. My guest is Amy Bloom. She's the author of so many of my favorites. White Houses is out now, and past titles include Come to Me, Love Invents Us, Away, Where the God of Love Hangs Out, Lucky Us. I just love your books, and you can visit Amy's site at amybloom.com. And welcome to Reading with Robin, Amy.
Thank you.
We've never chatted before, have we? I do not think
We have
so.
not.
We have not. I know I had the pleasure of meeting you a few summers ago at Book Expo when you were on that fabulous panel. I still talk about that panel. I enjoyed that panel so much.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Are you going back this year or no?
I don't think so. I don't have any plans to.
Because the book's out now. I know it depends on when the books come. So White Houses has been out for a week?
Yes, I think about maybe a week and a half, yeah.
Okay, a week and a half. And I read, I think you were tweeting that it was your first sighting at an airport. And
that's true.
Does that ever get old? You've written many books, but does that ever get old?
Well, no. I mean, because, writing is so different than publishing. And so, it's always nice to feel that, other people outside my immediate family are indeed reading this book, and that's nice.
Well, I love when I'm at the airport and I always leave so much time because, we have to. And when I'm hanging out by the books, which of course I don't need any because I come fully armed, but I love to hand sell if I have extra time, and I love to move books around, which I'm sure they love.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, always.
You could make a whole career doing that.
Right? Right? Put my books front and center, just like in the best position, or I just wait to see if someone looks like they need a little help, and then I help them. It's just a fun thing to do when you don't want to be like, in the fourth snack place, go hang out with the books and see if I can be of service to the lost reader. And so when I saw that picture of the books and talking about having it spotted, it really is a lot of fun. What are you hearing from readers? So the book, obviously, they're out early and the reviews come and you hear from that, but after a week and a half, like actual readers are reading the book. And what are you hearing?
Well, I think it would be odd for somebody to get in touch with me for the express purpose of explaining how much they disliked my book. So
you'd be surprised.
I guess I would. I'm happy to say that I would.
Yes.
But, people have been, very warm and enthusiastic and described their emotional response to it, and it's lovely. I mean, it's a very different process than the process of writing. It's a very public one, and it's also the case that you can't be read without readers. And so I feel like, at last, here are my dance partners.
And this is your first historical fiction novel, right?
Yes, it is.
Right. Mm-hmm. So and I have to say, to me, when I'm reading historical fiction, and I finished with the book, and I was telling Amy before we started how much I enjoyed the book tremendously, and those are the only books that I have on the show. People ask me, you seem to like everything, and that's not how it works. That's what I have on, books that I love. And when I finished reading it, I wanted to know more, and I had some questions, and I started looking around, and that's how I know that I'm so invested in a story when I just want more information. I just want to learn more about Eleanor Roosevelt, about
Lorena Hickok. Well, you're going to have a hard time finding a lot of information about Lorena Hickok, but you certainly won't have any trouble finding information about Eleanor Roosevelt.
Right. Yeah, I didn't see a lot, but it was just. So, how did you get interested in the story? And talk a little bit. I don't usually talk about the research, but certainly, as you mentioned, there isn't a lot of information. How did you manage that?
Well, there are 3,000 letters between them at the Roosevelt Library, which is not a short, reading activity. It's there's a great deal of information within those letters, and there is, in addition to the letters that she donated to the library, there's also some of her own, meaning Lorena's own writing, which she makes a brief foray into autobiography and writes a little bit about her childhood. not very much, but the facts are there. And in the novel, I really do work from the historical facts. There's nothing I write that is contradicted by the historical record. There are things where there's plenty of room for interpretation, and there's plenty of room for acts of imagination, which is why it's a novel and not a history.
Sure.
And that's just a great pleasure to be able to, use the facts to find something maybe more important and more illuminating the facts, which is a certain kind of truth in people's lives.
Well, it was such a love story, really. I mean, to me, that's how the book read, as
absolutely
just such a passionate, page-turning, just thinking about the time, when the story takes place during those years, and I couldn't help but think, what would Eleanor and Lorena think of the Me Too movement, and everything that's happening now, and how that would sort of play out, but just what the backdrop of everything else going on in our history, really, and the amazing amount of attention, obviously being First Lady and that responsibility and managing all that Eleanor managed, and to have a private life as well. And we did visit at Hyde Park, and I don't know how long we stayed. I feel like we walked around outside more than inside. But are the letters there? Is that where they are, at the library?
Yeah, they're in the library.
Yeah.
All 18 boxes of them.
And so the family obviously has them and has given access. But do you think Eleanor would want them out there? Or I don't know how that was left.
I don't imagine that she would.
Right.
I don't think you would either.
No, I wouldn't.
Your entire course. It's like so. There you have it.
I know,
on the other
right?
hand, I don't quote from the letters.
No. I just mean the idea of letters being out there. I've talked about that before. Yeah.
Anybody who's not a complete exhibitionist is not going to be thrilled by that, and that's why so many correspondences that are published are carefully edited, and things are left out, and sometimes things are fabricated. I remember there's a beautiful book of correspondence centered on Noel Coward, in which it turns out that a great deal of the material was fabricated, although it was a wonderful read. And so, but in this case, the letters stand as part of the record, and Lorena donated them with the condition that they not be opened for 10 years after her death. And she burned several hundred as well, because she thought that they were not sufficiently discreet.
Interesting. Yeah, I just, the things that remain, and, what gets done with them is always interesting. So it was 10 years after.
Yes.
And, I just wonder what, the children or grandchildren or, when somebody takes such care to keep things at a certain view, and then there they are. I just that's what's
well. On the other hand,
history.
it was not Eleanor who took such great care to keep things out of view. That was never her interest and never her inclination. So, she was not she was by nature certainly a private and reticent person, but she was not surprised to discover that she had enemies, and she had no qualms about being criticized, and I don't think she would have felt that she had a particularly strong wish to keep her private life concealed from the rest of the world out of shame.
Right.
I think she was by nature a private person, and probably would have been reluctant to have people read all of her letters to Franklin as well. On the other hand, she wrote a column called My Day, in which she shared her thoughts on a regular basis with millions of readers 6 days a week.
So there's that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. The things that that you're sharing, as opposed to, but it's just interesting to have that volume, of letters, and just to have that access. So did you read all 3,000 or no?
I did.
Did you really?
I did.
Wow. Anything you didn't get to use?
I felt that was part of the job.
That's amazing. Anything you didn't get to use in the book that you wanted to fit in somewhere, it just didn't work, or something, things that you were really surprised to find out that you going into it that you had no idea?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think that I had some idea who Eleanor Roosevelt was.
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't know at the beginning how moved I would be by the idea of 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, this is a very long relationship. There are a lot of ups and downs and separations and breakups and reconnections, but the relationship never ends. It endures.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to recognize how moved I was by that at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, as I was explaining my feelings on this just epic love story, it was very moving, very emotional reading, and the dialogue certainly, like, is imagined. It seems so, you've just created such a story that I just felt so immersed in their lives and going back and forth in the time period, and remembering what was going on in the nation
Mm-hmm.
at the time and all of that, and that, I sort of felt like we got a peek into what was going on in the White House and just imagining everything that the president was going through and the conversations and the comings of goings of people and what things are like now and the access that, we feel like things are just sort of out in the open, but what it was like then. It's just fascinating. And it wasn't that long ago. That's the other.
It wasn't that long ago. This is not the ancient past. This is the recent past. And It was a lot of fun writing about the White House because it was, in those days, basically a ramshackle boarding house.
Yeah.
It was not in great shape. It was not fancy. And the goal was not to be fancy. The goal was not that it should be a hotel with gold faucets. The goal was that it should reflect the values of the American people, which included, at that time, modesty.
How refreshing.
Yes, well, no, I know it may be hard for people to grasp, but
that's
nevertheless.
The thing, right? Yeah, exactly. That it's just imagining that it was, how far it's gone, whichever way. And now you did an event the other night at the Roosevelt House. What was that like?
Yeah.
That must have been.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, interesting, of course, to be in the twin townhouses, the ones that Sarah Delano Roosevelt bought for herself and the adjoining one for Franklin and Eleanor and their children with a sliding door on every floor so she could just pop through on any of the floors and visit with the family. And
that's convenient.
So that was lovely to be in that space and very interesting. And then it was just a pleasure and an honor and also a lot of fun to be in a dialogue with Blanche Wiesen Cook, who is the biographer of Eleanor Roosevelt.
Wow. And that was, did I read that you had read was it her biography?
Oh, absolutely. There is only, I mean, really, I have to say, there's really only one great biography of Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's by Blanche Wiesen Cook. And especially the first two volumes are just fascinating and wonderfully written and just great and compelling stuff. And all three volumes together are really, what a biography should be.
Wow. Well, I was fascinated reading about her, Eleanor's time in Europe and, being called back and her sense of duty and family and, what if she hadn't or what.
She didn't really have a lot of choice. I mean, she would have had to have been an extraordinary human being to defy her family, and also she had no money of her own.
Well, there's that.
So she would have had to defy her family and, get a job as a governess at the age of 18, having lived in extraordinary privilege. So I think she would have had to be a fairly amazing person to do all that. And she did not.
She did not. She came home and she did what was expected. Right. So, which part of their story or which part of the book was one of your favorites to write? Which time period?
Oh, I mean, for me, it all becomes one river, and so they're all different. I mean, I loved inventing the circus for Lorena to join when she's an adolescent.
Yeah, that was
briefly
wild.
Because I love writing about carnivals and sideshows, especially in the early part of the 20th century, because they were such enormous events in the lives of the communities.
Yeah.
These annual events that people waited for months and months. I really loved writing the scenes between Lorena and Franklin.
Yeah.
Because I feel that was a way of looking at them that had not been done before.
Mm-hmm.
I love writing the moments of intimacy between Eleanor and Lorena because it's something nice about the opportunity to write about a love affair that is not based on people being young and glossy and glamorous.
Yeah.
As if that is the only condition for romantic love. So,
exactly.
I liked all those parts.
Yeah, it was just, all of it. It's just, I'm telling everybody to read this book. I'm on the phone with Amy Bloom. Her brand new book is called White Houses, and it is out. You can visit Amy's website at amybloom.com, and you can find her on Twitter. You have an author page on Facebook as well. And is it the case that writing reviews on Goodreads and those sorts of things are helpful to you? Because I'm always happy to have people write positive reviews of my work wherever they are. I don't know. I'm sure that it's helpful in the sense of it's a good and positive thing. Yeah, and it moves the books up a little bit. I always tell readers when they ask, what should we do if we want to share the books or, post about them and pick them for your book clubs and write reviews and all of that.
All those things are great for a writer, and writers appreciate them.
Yes, absolutely. And do you hear from your readers often?
I do some, which is just lovely. It's really wonderful. It's, as I say, you don't have read without a reader. No, without a reader, your book would be very, very lonely. I love this part in the book where you say every couple has the same 5 arguments in their lifetime, which is just the one over and over until people die or divorce. I thought that was what it depends on is who you are and what your parents did to you. You talk about that a little. I thought that was one of my starred favorite places. Oh, well, thank you. I feel like, I have I'm not a kid myself, and I have an interest in the long run. So I like sort of looking at how relationships develop and how they fall apart and how they come back together again. And that's just a real long-term interest for me, because the only thing that interests me is really people. People are fascinating. They're endlessly fascinating. Did writing this book make you want to delve into another historical fiction, down that path for another book? I have been giving it some thought, and I'm beginning work on a novel about the brilliant, eccentric, complicated family of Marie Curie. Ooh. So that will go from turn-of-the-century Paris to Auschwitz. Wow. Well, you've got me hooked. Sign me up for that one, Amy. Oh, thank you so much. No, I love your book. So then that was a yes. So the historical fiction, and the pieces of history and the different angles that writers will come at them, is all, it's just when you think, and that's not something I feel like has been out there, right? So, and even if so, it's always different. I think these books that just make us think and are so much more relevant today than we might even think they are. Which pieces? I think that's something that's so fascinating about fiction and historical fiction in particular, and I especially also the press, and the reverence that the press showed or didn't show, in politics and access, and how, I can't help but thinking, what it's like today and what kind of stories. Can you talk about that a little? Well, I would hope that if you were a journalist and you were living in the White House, you would do what she did, which would be to say, I cannot do both. No, it's true that not everybody's going to do that, but she acted with integrity, and even if you don't see a lot of that around you, it's not as if nobody understands what it looks like. Yeah. And in terms of covering the White House, there were certain things that the journalists had agreed not to address. But mostly that was Franklin's disability.
Right, that was just not, yeah.
You know, the issues about his affairs were, I mean, they weren't addressed, but nor were they particularly hidden. I mean, so if you were Mr. and Mrs. Smith in, you know, Muncie, Indiana, you might or might not conclude that Missy LeHand was Franklin Roosevelt's mistress. But also, nobody considered that to be a particularly scandalous piece of information.
Yeah.
And after all, the man was in a wheelchair, and after all, you know, his wife did travel a lot, and I don't think there was a feeling of that being a huge scandal or a particular deal breaker in any way in terms of the fact that Franklin could not walk at all was much more concealed than the fact that he had these intimate and flirtatious relationships with women around him who were not his wife. That was not concealed. The fact that he couldn't walk at all was certainly hidden.
Isn't that amazing? Like, how did they, well, I guess they pull that off.
Well, they pulled that off by having an agreement with the press that nobody was to photograph him being carried.
Yeah.
And he was always described as having a great deal of difficulty in walking, which is like saying, yes, which is like saying, I have a great deal of difficulty in flying. It's like, it's so difficult, I can't do it.
That is,
and,
that is,
you know,
well,
that was
not
the case
untrue.
for him.
Right.
That's
not
right.
untrue. Wow. I know that's one of those things when that sort of came out, thinking like, you know, that anybody would keep to an agreement is really another thing that's hard to sort of wrap my head around, although I'm sure that there are things like that. But he had a great difficulty walking. Well, there you go. So did you feel like that their relationship, Lorena and Eleanor's, took the path that was most likely, you know, the way their story runs out? Was that, did you have other hopes for them as you were writing the book?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been wonderful and a very different kind of love story and a very happy ending in some ways. If after Franklin's death, they can find a compatible lifestyle that suits both of their needs, and they can, you know, as Lorena says, rock on the porch in their cardigans, have coffee, and read books. That would be wonderful. That was not the shape of these complicated women's lives.
I know. I was really hoping that. I think as it, Lorena says, I've been lonely in my life, but never when drinking strong coffee, wearing my fleecy slippers, and standing in my own kitchen. I just love that visual. And, yeah, for the both of them to be doing that and in their space alone. Yeah, it was really very heartbreaking love story, and I loved it so much. And it's Amy Bloom's White Houses, and do not miss this book. I have been tagging, I think I've tagged you a bunch of times when people post on Facebook, what should I read? And I was you know, you're welcome, or especially when people talk about enjoying historical fiction and, you know, what's the last book that you read that you loved and that sort of thing. And so I'll ask you, what are you reading? What have you enjoyed lately?
Oh, I am so behind. I can't even bear to talk about it.
I'm sorry to bring up a tough topic.
I don't read a lot of contemporary fiction when I'm writing because I am so affected by other people's voices and the way they tell their stories, and I find all of that very compelling and unfortunately somewhat distracting.
Sure.
And so now I'm going from having finished the book to getting started on working on a script for a proposed miniseries of the book. That's where my energy is going at the moment, and so I think contemporary fiction is going to have to wait for a couple of months, but it looks like it's going to be a great stack.
Oh yeah, they will stack, and then you choose, you know, as we all do, you choose wisely anyway, because it's such an important time spent with a delicious book. But they will be there waiting for you. I didn't want to ask because that's always the question: will this be a movie? Will this be a Netflix series? Will this be? But I'm very excited to hear that you're working on a script.
Well, we shall see. Yeah, we shall see what it's going to be.
I will stay tuned for more information about that, and also go to Amy's website to see where I know there are events coming up in Connecticut. I saw April 3rd in Westport. And
that's right.
Yeah, at the library. And you can go on the website, amybloom.com, for more information. And also the 5th, I saw you'll be in Connecticut at Gunn Memorial Library.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah, the library events. I love the Westport Library. So
yeah, it's wonderful.
make sure to share that with all the people in that area that I know will enjoy this and enjoy the book. And it's White Houses. I loved it, and I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation, and I'm glad that you told me not to keep looking for more information about Lorena. You've saved me some time there. And, as much as I've read about Eleanor, I have not read the biography we're discussing, so I can put that in my stack.
You won't be sorry. I don't.
No, I'm sure I won't be. It's fascinating, really, and thank you so much. Amy Bloom, White Houses. Do not miss this book. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.